give about a couple minutes, everybody get placed, and we will start when Alderman Redpath returns.
Doug, I think he's talking to you. He asked, would you be having everyone go to the podium to
Yes.
talk?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because you know, I down there. And after dark, you got to get on up with that.
Oh, nice, thanks. Well, I'll sit there next, after when you guys come up, I'll sit there.
All right, Mr. Director Brown, you may proceed, sir.
What now?
You ready to go?
Sure. I mean, if everybody's ready, I'm ready.
You ready to go? Let's do it.
Don't report to her, though.
Well,
Resources.
first I want to thank all my staff for putting the budget together. It takes a lot of hours to do that, and then especially Ben Kerfoot and Dakota Capranica, they're the only two in finance right now. I mean, normally it's a department of 5, and they're only 2, and the years of experience they have is only a few years. So it's they're doing a really fantastic job. I also want to thank all of our employees, really, that help us operate more efficiently. And the results show what that is. It's reliable, quality services to our customers at low rates. Also, I'll give some quick highlights, and then I'll turn it over to Scott Rogers, Electric Division Manager, and Todd LaFountain, the Water Division Manager, to go over their respective budgets. But I will say it's just another challenging year with expenses rising and large infrastructure type projects coming. Here's an overview of the departments. We have 5 divisions. And I'll mention that Regulatory Affairs Director, Deborah Williams, is here, and then also the Director of ISD, Mike Jameson, is also in attendance. I do not have a Finance Director or Assistant Finance Director at this time. So some highlights for the water fund budget. We're going to use $710,000 in cash. We're going to end with $1.6 million in cash. That's 30 days of cash. That is well below basically the 60 days of cash threshold that rating agencies look at. The water fund, it's going to be a common theme, but it's not in good shape, but it's balanced. We use cash every year to balance the budget, and we have a lot of infrastructure projects coming, and Todd's going to go over those. Electric fund's different. The electric fund's in very good shape. We're going to use $8.53 million in cash. We'll end with $50 million in cash and 125 days of cash on the books. And even though it's great, we've done this, as building cash. So because we know there's a lot of infrastructure type projects on the electric side coming. And Scott will touch on those as well. I just want to make sure everybody knows that, we do have expenses coming. For the pilot and the city services, the value of the city services that we provide to the city, as well as the shared services payment to the corporate fund. So for our city services, we provide ISD services. Basically, it's the labor, $2.1 million. I'll just hit some big ones. Traffic lights, $2.5 million. Shared services across both funds are about $1.5 million. The electric pilot is up about $900,000 from last year. But if you notice, the water fund pilot is $0. Last year, we had this similar type thing but Alderman Redpath had an amendment where he waived the pilot. Well, in trying to balance the water fund, we went ahead and just included that in there because that was the only way to get it balanced, even after the steep cuts that we've made that Todd will discuss. But our total value to the city is about $17.4 million. as we've touted before, we're the lowest rates, water rates in the state. So if you look at an average bill for an average customer, and then, we're on the left-hand side. The right-hand side at the highest, at least on this graph, is Chatham. And then having the lowest rates in the state's great, but, we do have those large infrastructure needs that are coming, which Todd will discuss. And what we're seeing, though, is that other utilities are making requests to cover their rising expenses, so the disparity it'll grow even more than what we're showing now going forward. Electric rates. So we look at an average bill for an average customer of ours and compare it against two other utilities here, and you can see we're doing very well on the electric side, and that comes from having local control and having Unit 4. It's protecting our customers really from volatile energy prices that's been occurring for the last year and changes in the energy market. And it's definitely a solid, reliable resource going forward. What we also know is that the investor-owned utilities are asking the Illinois Commerce Commission for future raises. So again, the disparity too will grow for our bills on the electric side compared to others also. Here is just another comparison if you want to look at the statewide utility average for an average customer of ours. You can see that since 2019 we've been tracking very well, and we've gotten even better here in the more recent time frame. Now I'm going to turn it over to Scott Rogers to go over the electric fund.
Thanks, Doug. So we'll start off with the electric fund resources. You can see from the pie chart, no surprise, it's the same every year. Retail and operating is the majority of our resources. Wholesale's 4% this year. It's a little more than last year. That was one of the other increases, and I'll get into some of that here in a second. Going over quantitatively what our numbers are from retail and operating, you'll see a variance of $26 million from last year. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, there is a slight increase, and we'll show it one of the last slides I have, a slight increase in electrical usage. The other part of that is about $22 million of that is fuel adjustment charges. And I'm going to try to quantify that in some of the questions that might come out of that. When we put this budget together, we put this together starting in September. In September, natural gas prices were $7 to $8 a decatherm, and with that, market prices for energy were up, so the units were going to run more, so there was a lot of coal expenses there. There was any purchase power we needed was up, and in addition, natural gas prices for running interstate and startup for the unit was up. So with that comes an increase in fuel adjustment charges. So, and then you'll also see next, wholesale is up $3 million, and again, that is due to when we ran the budget, the market prices were so volatile and high, that's what all the forward curves were showing. So there is some variation there that I fully believe will be under that. Currently today, natural gas has fell to $2.70 a decatherm from $7, $8, $9 highs. So there's a lot of variability in that number. It just happened to be the time we put it together, that number was very high. So it's going to reflect in this budget. Fund balance, 9.3 million, 9.6 million. 9.5 of that is ERIRF funds for the Lime Lagoons, and I'll cover some of that in addition later. When you get to expenses, again, when we talked about, or when I was talking about coal prices being up, coal being up, natural gas prices being up, energy market being up, commodities are almost 50% this year, and primarily that is from purchase power, from the additional coal we're going to burn and the additional gas that we anticipate burning with the prices being up. Go to a quantitative view here. One thing I want to point out here, a couple things. One, personal services down 1.25 million. That is primarily due to the final closure of all the plants and the labor cutbacks at the plant. Capital improvements up $7.8 million. Again, part of that is some of the work we're doing in addition to $9 million of ERIRF for the Lime Lagoons. Commodities and contracts, again, $29 million, as I discussed earlier. Coal, natural gas, all our commodities are up, primarily due to the projection of a lot of load. And the other biggest one at the bottom, other, that $3 million, 2.2 of that $3 million is the city's, or the electric funds portion of the ERP program, or ERP project for the city, for their enterprise resource project. Broken down by department, transmission distribution is the largest, and generation second largest, and again, the majority of those expenses in those departments have been relatively stable, but the biggest numbers in them right now are purchase power for transmission distribution and fuel expenses for generation. Now we'll get on to some projects we've got planned for this year. The relocation of the dispatch center and ISD. So the dispatch center is our primary control for our system and our grid. It's where we monitor and control it. ISD data center is the main servers for all of the city. The dispatch center has to be relocated due to the railroad relocation project. The data center currently is housed in the basement of Municipal Center East, which is not an ideal location. So with that move, we decided we needed a hardened building for both, so we're going to put them both in one building. That's roughly an $18 million total project, current projections. Land has been purchased for that. We have a preliminary design complete. This year, we're working on final design and engineering for that. Some of the transmission distribution projects. Again, we try to keep investing in our infrastructure, trying to maintain reliability. This year, with some of the overhead projects, line clearance, it's $3 million. We do a cycle for line clearance, it's 5.2 years. So every 5.2 years, we try to clear, there's, I think, a total of 440 miles of line in 5 years. So that's part of that. That's $3 million this year. Pole replacements, again, we've got a significant number of poles in our system that are over 50 years old. And so we continue to do 200 to 300 poles a year that we know are getting aged and replace those. And LED street lightings. And with LED street lighting, we're going to try to take advantage of any grant or potential tax credits that might be available out there for some of those replacements. And electric fault indicators, those we put in a distribution system where we can isolate sections of line, and it's an indication of a fault that helps us get to failures or faults quicker and identify them to get customers back on in a timely manner. From underground rebuilds, this year we're planning on doing some work downtown in some vaults, replacing some aged equipment in the vaults. The Popular Place rehabilitation, we did get a grant for that, and we are going to take all that overhead lines or distribution in that, and that's going to go underground this year. And then substation and relaying, there's some significant work in some substations again, and we are going through our system with relays, replacing a number of relays that are outdated every year. So that's an ongoing project also. And again, it's just to maintain reliability in our system. At the power plant, Unit 4 low load operation. This is year one of that project. We'll start on that this year. What it's really designed to do is it will decrease the minimum load that we can run that unit at. And what that'll do is in off-peak hours or when market conditions are down, we'll be able to lower load farther than we can today, and that will be a savings to our customers, because then when the market's below our current existing variable cost, we pay the difference. So currently, that's an added expense, I'll say, where we will be able to reduce that expense in the future. Unit 4 fire protection, again, insurance recommendations. We started on these last year. We should have them all completed this year. That's some recommendations for fire protection at the plant that the insurance companies have recommended. Addition to some demolition at the power plant, we did an asbestos audit at Lakeside a few years ago, so we know what asbestos items are in that. At Dahlman, we need to do the asbestos audit in there to get a quantitative number of what we're facing with asbestos. And we'll start some first phase of some dismantling on some of the exterior equipment. I know one of the ward meetings, one of the questions was asked, are we going to take the stacks down? Not yet. There's a lot of exterior equipment around those stacks, and we need to get a lot of that out of the way to have a place to drop the stacks when we do take them down. So that'll be ongoing in multiple year contract. Energy and capacity. So there's been a lot of discussion on this too. We are still pursuing additional capacity agreements. We are still pursuing looking at solar. 100 megawatts of solar fit our portfolio very well. Some of the supply chain constraints, some of the federal tax tariffs that are federal government tariffs that were put in place that have been relaxed now, I'll say. In addition to, there's some, from IRA, there's some federal grants out there for federal money from investment tax credits and production tax credits. So we're looking at all that. Polysilicon, which is a major raw material in solar panels, that price has dropped over 50% in the last year. So those prices are starting to come down. When we were looking at it, they were just uneconomical. So we're still following those trends and trying to see where those end up, determine viability of those options. Battery is another one. We're looking at either partnering with somebody or constructing our own significant sized battery project, and that will cover us for terms of when we get into high peak loads, we can discharge those batteries and recharge them on off peak when it's cheaper. Part of some of the issues we're having with those that goes into the economics of both solar and batteries is the change to MISO's capacity structure this year. And there's a lot of unknowns with that. There's, from our standpoint, when we look at that, the capacity of those systems are being devalued. And so that's an impact to the economics when we start looking at that. $9.2 million ERIRF for Lime Lagoons, we've talked about before. That's the beginning. First thing we have to do before we start closing the ash ponds. And our plan is to close the ash ponds in the most environmentally responsible manner, and that's cap in place. That is currently estimated at $10 million. We still have a permit at the EPA that we're waiting for. We have not received that yet. And then the carbon capture project, $67 million project, not really a cost to us directly with the exception of labor. We do spend some time with our engineering staff and some of our operations staff on assisting them. But that will be a good project for the city overall. Oh, I skipped the Black Start. The Black Start restoration system. Small gas turbines, potentially gas turbines. There's even been some discussion of maybe even hydrogen turbines. There's some technology coming out there, but in the short term, they have to be under 25 megawatts per CJ. That will be additional capacity that we can use for our system and additional benefit of being able to black start either interstate and or Unit 4. Smart city infrastructure projects. So electric vehicle charging stations. Currently, we do have a notice of intent to move forward with that. We also have a agreement in place to start researching grant funding opportunities. And so once we get through those, we'll start looking at land rights. We have identified approximately 20 stations across the city. So the plan is over the next 5 years to do that. So in the meantime, with land rights, and we're also designing the infrastructure from our system to be able to feed those. AMI meters, the advanced metering infrastructure, that's about a $15 million project. And again, that'll be a multi-year project. That allows us to get a lot of automation on our readings and a lot more data for our meters in the electric system. Todd's got a project parallel with that almost too. That'll allow us a few different things. One, time of use rates and see if those are functional when you start getting to electrification of vehicles and electrification of housing. Is it going to be beneficial to us if we can see those changes with time of use and develop a structure that will incentivize households or businesses to move that load to a different time? So that'll give us the data to be able to do that. That infrastructure for the meters, we are also anticipating on being able to use for distribution automation. And again, that will be able to automate our distribution system to where we don't always have to roll a truck out to someplace to go open switches and move to be able to get customers back. So it'll help getting response time to customers down. Smart LED street lighting, again, as we were talking about smart LEDs earlier, changing LEDs earlier, that same system infrastructure for the AMI meters we can use to control street lighting. One of the other projects we've got going on, State of Illinois Data Center, that's on Dirksen Business Park there on South Dirksen. We are going to have to extend fiber down to that, so we're going to plan on doing that this year. We've had discussion with the UIS Innovation Hub downtown here. We know we're going to put fiber down to them. In discussions with them, it looks like probably FY25 before we get to there, but that's something we're planning for. And the last thing on the infrastructure, we're adding fiber from the west side to the east side to provide I-3 a path of broadband, and that's $1.5 million of ARPA funds and $1.5 million of matching funds. And as I said earlier, you can see from a retail trend from our side, historically we see a 1% decline. If you follow that line out before COVID, we're slightly above that 1% decline. So some of that, excuse me, some of that is electrification that we're seeing preliminarily in the city, and some of that is just load coming back, weather dependent sometimes. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. LaFountain.
Good evening, everybody. It's not often that the Water Division gets to be in the second time slot or the main event time slot of the CWLP budget presentation, so I'll certainly try to live up to that billing.
I think that's because we got rid of Mecca's.
Was it? Yeah. All right, Water Division revenues. It comes as a surprise to no one that the sale of water is our biggest Water Division revenue. One thing I'll be driving home throughout the presentation is that grant proceeds, bond proceeds, and the use of fund balance continues to be a larger and larger portion of our overall revenue stream. In FY24, we are expecting those three items to contribute 42% of our overall revenues. Here you see a quantitative look at our departmental revenues. We are projecting our water sales to remain flat. We will see increases in bond proceeds, mainly through the injection of the ARPA fund dollars from the corporate fund. We'll increase our use of fund balance to make the overall FY24 budget balance, and we do expect to see some increases in contributions from developers. Here you see a graph of the retail water sales over the last 10 years. We do expect our water sales in FY24 to be flat. The net effect of the retirements, the Dahlman 31, 32, and 33 power plants have been about a 1.3 million reduction in revenues to the department. Now that's not all water sales. I did at one time get to charge the industrial rate to our electric partners. That's a much higher rate than what I charge a resident, $1.64 per 748 gallons. So it's almost double that. Switching sides of the ledger to expenses, our single biggest expense in FY24 is expected to be capital expenditures. So we're doing lots of capital projects. So despite our financial issues, we are still investing heavily in our critical infrastructure. Our second biggest expense is our employees. Our third largest expense is commodities. Commodities, one that I'm going to go into in much greater detail later in the presentation. Commodities in the water industry are increasing at a rate 4 to 5 times inflation. So water industry commodities have just gone through the roof in the last couple years. Here you see water fund expenses broken down by functional work area. Our water distribution department on Mason Street is our largest expense locale. That's primarily due to the fact that our head count's the highest at that particular site. Our water purification plant is our second highest expense location, and that's primarily due to the large and complex equipment we maintain at that site. And then one thing other thing I usually like to point out with this particular slide is we do spend about 9% of our budget out at the lake maintaining parks, lake lanes, and things of that nature. So we are adding value back to the city of Springfield up and above the treated water we deliver to our customers. Here you see a quantitative look at our departmental expenses. Again, we're looking at personnel, trying to keep personnel expenses relatively flat. We will spend more on capital improvements, and that's primarily through grant funding. And then, of course, commodities and contracts are increasing drastically in FY24. Getting into the commodities discussion, here you see a snapshot of our annual water chemical costs. These are the chemicals to treat the water at the purification plant over the last 25 years or so. You look at the very right side of that slide, you can see drastic increases in the last couple years. The FY24 projected chemical expenses are expected to be 30% higher than they were in FY23. Here you see that same information broken down on a per million gallon basis. Again, you see the sharp rise in chemical expenses over the last 2 fiscal years. So not all these commodities are increasing at the same rate. This is just an example of one extreme commodity increase. Back in the height of the pandemic in 2019, 2020, there in that range, we were paying a little less than $400 a ton for chlorine. This year we'll pay well in excess of $2,000 for that same ton of chlorine.
Rent shortage.
Yeah. There's a number of issues behind that, but yeah, there's shortages and a variety of other factors that go into that. So those commodity price increases, they're not limited to just chemicals out at the water purification plant. These are materials at our water distribution system, specifically pipes, hydrants, valves, fittings. You can see the sharp rise we're expecting in FY24. That is a 40% rise in pipe, hydrants, valves, things of that nature that we'll experience in FY24. So you can imagine with flat revenues and ever-increasing commodity expenses at maybe 4 or 5 times the rate of inflation, we faced a real challenge this year for balancing our FY24 budget. As we faced that challenge, the initial volley to the superintendents was to bring back a very lean budget, so our starting point was lower than it might have been in the past. After I got those budgets accumulated, we took a look line item by line item to see where else we could cut. We did find $1.5 million worth of cuts in our traditional round 1 and round 2 of budget cuts. I sent that information back to our budget analyst, Ben. He came back to me and said it's not enough. So what that forced me into is an unprecedented round 3 of budget cuts. Round 3 involved both labor and non-labor budget cuts. So the labor is shown here. I am proposing to eliminate 4 positions in FY24 and also to eliminate all temporary labor out at the lake services. Those 4 positions are currently unfilled. There's 2 of them that were vacated by retirements, and there's 2 of them that were vacated by individuals seeking employment with other employers. Our round 3 non-labor cuts involve the cutting of projects out at our water purification plant and out at the lake, as well as cutting all non-FY23 auto loan related equipment. So in total, these round 3 cuts were painful, and they amounted to about $1 million worth of additional cuts. So it always could be worse, right? So we got a couple things working in our favor in FY24, and that's the fact that we have several one-time revenues and one-time expense reductions. So we are asking council once again to waive the Water Division's contribution to the pilot program. We are expecting the sale of our Days Inn property. The electric fund is financing our new lime lagoons. We do expect corporate ARPA funds in the amount of $2.77 million. We do have an IEPA grant for lead service line replacements in the amount of $2 million, and we are expecting to spend down cash almost $750,000. In total, all these one-time budget impacts are to the positive about $17 million to our budget. So you could imagine what those round 3 of budget cuts would have looked like without these one-time impacts. We do not expect most of these to be there in FY25. So where did we land for FY24 with our budget? What do we hope to accomplish? Big ticket items. So out at the lake, we have partnered with Public Works to try to extend sewer service to Linden and Hawthorne Lane. That would bring 67 sewer connections to the residents out there. That would mark the biggest progress we've made with that program in quite some time. We do have Martin Engineering working on lake area sewer plans. These are plans to bring sewer to all the unsewered area around the lake currently. The idea there is to have shovel-ready plans if additional grant funding is available, or any funding for that matter. We plan to continue our lake shore or shoreline stabilization program. That's a program where we armor approximately 1 mile of shoreline with riprap each year. We plan to continue our watershed work. This is work where our water resources individuals work with farmers out in the watershed to implement best management practices. And again, the best management practices are efforts to keep sediment and nutrients out of the lake. We, of course, also hope to bring closure to the supplemental water supply and get a record of decision from the Corps of Engineers. At the water purification plant, we are undertaking a DCS distributive control system upgrade. That involves an operating system upgrade along with bringing current our antivirus and cybersecurity software. CMT has been tasked with doing an engineering study on the taste and odor issue. We plan on replacing our 2 original South Fork pumps. Those original units out there were installed in 1952. And then, of course, Scott alluded to the lime fund or the lime project out at the power plant or the ash ponds. At water distribution, we plan on continuing our lead service line replacement and inventory work. We have a major site upgrade that we're going to have to undertake at the Mason Street facility. That's being necessitated by the railroad consolidation project. We do plan on installing 3,000 AMR meters. That's replacing 3,000 current direct read meters with our in-house staff. And we will do main replacement for deteriorated main to the tune of about 1 mile of work. One thing to notice about the last 3 slides, again, the majority of this work is being financed through grants or the electric department or the 2020 bond fund, but one-time revenue sources. So again, this is a recap of our ARPA projects. Don't really have more to say on this other than to thank the administration and council for earmarking those monies for these critical projects. Obviously, these wouldn't be capable without ARPA funds. So what would we like to for the Water Division to look like long term? So we're getting out there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 budget years. Out at the lake, we'd like to undertake a dredging program that could take a number of different looks, but a dredging program of some type. We obviously like to get a record of decision from the Corps of Engineers and move forward on a secondary water source, whatever that project might look like. We'd like to get sewer extended all the way around the lake and complete all our lake area road paving, as well as make better use of the beach house. At the water purification plant, we've got a number of construction projects out there we'd like to undertake. They're very detailed in nature. I won't go into the individual projects. And I know a lot of times the question I get, well, wait a minute, you just invested $100 million into that infrastructure, and we did. But keep in mind the core facility out there is still the 1932 infrastructure. It's like an old house. If we don't continue to invest money into that structure, it becomes not feasible to use in the upcoming years. Long-term water distribution projects, we'd like to do, along with the electric, an AMI metering system. This would be the Water Division's contribution to Smart City. We'll continue to work with Public Works on their railroad consolidation and other important projects, getting out in front of those projects, relocating main, replacing main, and things of that nature. We would like to institute a true sustainable main replacement program. I'll go into that in a couple of slides. And of course, we've got the looming lead service line legislation out there set to kick in 2027. So more about lead. Obviously, I could talk about lead for an hour. It probably deserveth of that type of time frame, but just in brief, we do have about 10,000 lead service lines in the city of Springfield. If we look at that project and what the 2027 regulations now say, we would basically be mandated to replace those lead service lines over a 20-year period. We're just kind of ballparking the figure of $100 million for that construction project to be completely lead-free. So what have we been doing to kind of prepare for 2027? So we started our program replacing lead service line in 2019. We started slow. We started with about 150 service line replacements in our first year, and we've gradually tried to ramp up that effort so that it's not such a heavy lift when we have to replace 500 per year in 2027. Just as an aside, Illinois is one of only 3 states in the nation that does have a mandated lead service line replacement law on the books. So finally, water main replacement program. This is something we'd like to roll in the industry. If you're ideally doing this work, a solid main, a good main that's installed properly should last about 100 years. So the theory is you should replace about 1% of your distribution system every year. That would give you, I guess, a just-in-time replacement at 100 years. For us, that would look like about 7.6 miles of main replacement at an annual cost of about $10 million. So with that, I'll turn it back to Doug.
ISD, which is basically the city's IT department, they do a lot of work for a lot of different departments, so I'm not going to be able to go through all that in detail, but just a couple of the big things. We talked about it last night. For the first item is the upgrade of the ERP system, the city's enterprise resource planning software. It's about a $9 million project. For FY24, we're planning on $3.75 million in the budget, and it's a 60-40 split between the utility and the corporate fund. This software basically is I guess you say it's not, the support is dwindling for it, and it's time to really upgrade it. And it is the backbone of the city and how we operate. I mean, it controls accounting, finance, purchasing, and part of the finance is budgeting, payroll, those kinds of things. We wouldn't be able to operate without the system. And part of the reason for the upgrade too is it's going cloud-based. So that's another big thing that is going to be a change for us going forward. And it'll improve some of the processes that basically kind of weren't implemented necessarily the last time around, from what I understand it. So, and part of that improvement will be CityWorks, integrating CityWorks into that. In fact, ISD is actually hiring right now somebody dedicated to CityWorks. So instead of it being solely in Public Works domain, we're going to bring that and try to get more departments to interact with CityWorks. One of the other things, I guess, is cybersecurity for the city. Everybody knows that cyber attacks are increasing, and they're going to continue to increase going forward. So we got to look at adding staff. We got to look at adding hardware and software to increase our protection levels for that. And that funding is going to have to come from all the departments, basically on a user basis. And we'll be meeting with the departments, later this year to kind of discuss on how that's going to be an impact to their next fiscal budget, not this coming year's, but it'd be the FY25. So for our head count, you can see for our budgeted positions, we're at 523. That's gone down over the last few years just because of the plant retirements, mainly. Our actual headcount is lower than the budgeted because of vacancies. So, there's 59 vacancies on here, and that sounds like that's a lot, but it's a snapshot in time. So when this was done in, I think, middle of November, I believe, now out of that, we got 54 of those positions that are actually filled, being filled, or in the process, and then also like soon to be in the process. So it's not really a long-term picture of what we really have. It's just the fact that we are hiring constantly right now, and we have been for a while. But that's just the turnover of people retiring or leaving, et cetera, for that. Let's see here, I guess, so for our demographics, we're about 10 to 12% minorities and 18 to 20% female. And I kind of went back and looked at this to see, and that's a kind of a year to year on average. It's because it fluctuates. As a few people leave, a few people are hired, it changes, but on average, that's what it's been. Prior to 2015, though, minorities were 7 to 8.5%. So I know we've been growing. Always can do better, of course. The females have probably remained about the same, maybe a little bit on the lower end, under the 18 to 20, but still close to that range. Whoops. Here is basically a forward look of what we think of, who is eligible to retire. And within the next 5 years, we have about 37% of the workforce that's eligible. That means they've hit the right age and the minimum number of years. So, of course, we don't believe that all those people are going to retire. But it's still always a concern of ours, and trying to plan on, hiring for succession. And even in these tight labor market times, it's a challenge. And speaking of challenges, I want to kind of go over strengths and challenges, kind of wrap this up. So for the electric division strengths, it's about having that local control, having Unit 4 to kind of provide that shield from the volatile market prices, and having a reliable resource, having the low rates, and having a good financial condition. But we really couldn't do it without all our employees. So our employees are a great resource. But, starting to look at what the future holds is kind of exciting time right now. We've set ourselves up to be able to take advantage of the changes that are coming. And what I mean by that is looking at 100 megawatts of solar, which we've been trying to achieve, except for some of the issues that Scott had mentioned. And I had mentioned that previously before in front of the council. And even other technologies, for batteries and some other things that are coming out. Taking advantage of the grants, the federal grants, in fact, the federal dollars that are coming out, the tax credits that are available, that are going to be available for these kinds of projects, are really going to help us achieve some of that. So that's really a solid strength I think we've put ourselves in. Challenges, though, regional electric grid reliability. We've seen that happen last year, where MISO and a lot of the other regional electric grid operators came out and were, basically saying that there's issues out there and they need to be addressed. I think they even had issues in other areas more recently here over Christmas break. And environmental regulations still pose a challenge to our resources. Aging infrastructure is of issue. Attracting and retaining employees, I think we've covered that quite well over the last year, and that's going to continue to be a problem, as well as supply chain, delivery of equipment, materials, that's meters, transformers, wire, parts, etc. So for water, the strength is having the lowest rates in the state. But at the same time, we have some of the best infrastructure out at our water plant that's going to last 40 to 60 years. That's incredible, really, to spend that kind of money and have that. And then as Todd said, yes, there's still more to do. There always is at the water plant. Taking advantage of the opportunities for grants and loans on the water side as well to complete some projects. And again, our employees, it's one of our greatest resources. Challenges, though, flat to declining revenue with a low cash position, with expenses increasing much higher than revenues that are brought in. And you couple that with aging infrastructure, and the water fund's probably one of the most challenging times that we've ever been in with that mixture. But again, same issues, attracting and retaining employees and supply chain issues. Again, that's trying to get hydrants and meters and piping and valves. When we, either electric or water, when we can't get that equipment, those parts, those things that we need, it delays projects, which are critical to moving forward with. So with that, that's kind of a wrap on our presentation. I do want to say, I'll put it out there. I want to steal one from you. Alderman Hanauer brought it up. He said, I don't like your format on your budget presentation, or not your presentation, your budget materials. Some of our expenditures line items, it shows the variance, but it doesn't give an explanation, and that's my fault. It was kind of a mix-up when Bill McCarty had requested us to get that document, but with our limitations in finance department, we were way behind on that. We couldn't get it out, so we sent him what we had. We had the variances and all that. We didn't have the explanations. It's just a lack of experience for the finance group to understand what those might be. So it was a matter of taking a few more weeks really to sit down with Scott and Todd and the staff with the finance group and go down line by line and understand what those were. We have it. My fault for not sending it, but I'll get it to you.
All right.
Who was
I
first
pushed my
here?
button, by the way.
You did push your button. We had some buttons pushed.
You're at the-
He's at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, you're at the bottom.
Are the bottom of the list. So let's start we'll start at 608 Alderman Redpath.
I
About
pressed
57.
it when we started.
Y'all pressed it that in advance?
Yeah, I pressed it when he first started to make sure I was
if that's
first.
the case, we have to go with Alderman McMiniman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I thought it wasn't clear. All right.
Doug, Scott, Todd, and your staff, these were outstanding reports tonight. I know a lot of folks contributed to them. There's lots of substance tonight. There's significant forward planning. It was good to see. We're in really good shape on the electric side. I think the new administration coming in 8 years ago worked well with city WLP staff with the $500 million worth of refinance that took place, which increased our cash flow significantly. The mayor and our city attorney renegotiated the coal contract twice, which created another $8+ million of cash flow, or maybe in excess of that. But we created an environmental remediation fund, which is now over $20 million. Those are really significant accomplishments. Then meanwhile, we closed 3 power plants. So, and that's, helped us on the cost side and other ways, but it's also led to challenges too. I want to focus on the water side. Outstanding cost cutting there. That's really tough assignment to achieve, and you did it. You had a chart there that showed, we've got a problem with our water usage keeps flat to falling, and I want to focus on that. So, Clerk's office, could you put up that one screen display that I asked for? Meanwhile, I'm going to pass out these charts here that, Todd, you've seen this before. It's what U of I engineer Clark Bullard has been working on for, I think, 10 years. And it's too bad it kind of shows up small for the public, but when these get passed out, I'll explain what this does. It kind of shows that our our treated water usage is flat to falling. And it's been flat for over 50 years, but it's been falling the last 7 years. And so this is all in relation to Lake 2. That's what I'm going to lead up to. And I'm going to ask the utility for some help here. We're spending, we have to plan for lots of possibilities, including water shortages. But what I think this chart shows is, what looks like a red line up there. It shows that, water usage was climbing really significantly into the 1960s, and then it just went flat. But it was in the 1960s that we had the water study, and that's not my language up there. It says treated water, 55 years of faulty forecast. Maybe that faulty is too strong a word. That's not my word. It was Professor Clark Bullard put it there. But basically, our water studies, you show those yellow lines, they expected us to double our water usage in 1960s. And we had a number of these studies by outside firms. And then more recently, our most recent water study is, and if you guys are having a hard time reading this, Tim, could you pass these out to the staff and to the directors? Basically, what I'm going to ask for, Todd, is how much would an updated water usage study cost us? We haven't had one in 8 years, and the facts keep changing on water usage. This chart just shows treated water usage, and we see declines there, but we've also got untreated water dropping significantly with the retirements of the 3 power plants. We used a lot of water to slurry the ash over across the street, and then we don't have as much hydration taking place from the lake because we're not pushing out the heat into the water. So we need an analysis of just how much the facts have changed from these earlier engineering studies and consultants that have thought that we'd have rapid increases in treated water usage, but it hasn't happened. And now we've got the benefit of dropping untreated water usage from the lake. And as I understand it, the pumps that used to push water into the power plants were at an elevation in the lake that made it so that we didn't want to ever let the lake water drop below those pumps that push the water into the power plants. But now we're not pushing water into we're not pushing untreated water into the power plant. So there's a greater leeway if the lake drops down. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I'd like us to think about a study for the treated water needs that we have, and that might tell us how much of a risk we're facing into the future if there would be a 100-year drought or that kind of thing. So that's number one. I'd like to talk with you about a study and the cost of a study on treated water usage. And then number two, we've got Lake Sanchez down the south of us, and that power plant is going to close in 2 to 3 years. And they use their Lake Sanchez for a water source, but now they're not going to need it in 2 or 3 years. So, I know we've talked about it, Todd, already, about we need, a study, just a feasibility study of working with as I understand, the power plant owns the water rights to Lake Sanchez, and DNR owns the land around the lake, and just see if there's a feasibility to push some of that water, if it would be any good, to push some of that water down to our pumping stations on the South Fork of the Sangamon River, and augment what water the city has. So those are my 2 requests. I don't know if we put those in the budgets as amendments to the budget. I don't know what kind of dollars we're talking about. Maybe you can help with that.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to throw out a dollar amount, but yeah, we can get with the administration and see what can or cannot be done there. The last update was like 2016, I think it was. CDM Smith out of Chicago did the last water demand study. That was the last external update. We did do one internally and showed similar numbers to 2016 earlier this year. So I mean, the demand shifted, but it was pretty close to what it was in 2016, the last time we did this.
Well, thanks a lot. I hope we can discuss it some more when you've got time. Thanks a lot.
You got it.
Alderwoman Purchase.
Thank you. I learned this year to write my questions down because this was a lot to process. And I do just want to say I understand it a lot more this year with the tour that I took of the power plant and the water department to see what goes on when you talk about the increases. The first thing I want to address is I'm glad that we're funding the Helping Homes Winterization and Efficiency Program again for low-income and moderate families. But can you answer, are we staffed up in that office yet with the manager? Because I know that we're lacking some help and we need a lot of help.
Yeah, we basically just got approval to make the offer.
Okay.
So, I mean, I haven't heard if HR's made the offer and if the person accepted yet, but that's very close. And as well as we're trying to hire basically 2 individuals into that office.
Would
and
that get you
paperwork's
where
pending.
would that get you where you need to be to really run
Yes.
that office in
Yeah.
the community?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I like to keep pushing for this program because.
And we kept your levels too that you asked for last year in the budget again this year on that side.
Thank you, because saving energy is saving money. Then I want to move over into, I see that the CWLP revenue for residential electricity charges is increasing by 13.3 million or 17.6% in that area. Can you tell me a little bit about the average monthly residential and commercial bill amounts and how much in additional charges does that increase mean for those average bills?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
But it's again, what Scott said is that those projections were put together when natural gas prices were extremely high, and all our forward-looking curves that we get from like the Energy Authority and other entities were all basically projecting higher prices. So that would reflect into like fuel adjustments to where it would be higher. But the way things have gone now, we think it's going to be lower.
Okay.
Than what we've expected. And then there is a CPI charge too as on the meter charge, but I don't recall what that is off the top of my head.
Okay.
8.7% was the CPI, that was for that.
It's a lot to understand all these numbers. I could tell you that. That's why I had to write it down. My next question is contractual services costs for the electric budget engineering department are increasing significantly too. Can you just tell me a little bit of what's driving those costs is so high? And I wrote another little note. In particular, freight costs are almost tripling from 2.3 million to 6.5 million, and equipment repair and maintenance is almost doubling from 6.5 million to 12.1.
Comment on that.
I did my homework this year, if you can't tell.
Let's go back to the beginning. What was the
Okay.
first one?
Contractual services costs for electric budgets engineering department are increasing.
Page 15, I think it is, Scott.
Nope, it's I could tell you, page 283. And this is also page 15 of 30 with the CWLP expenditure budget detail,
So,
section 2.
Yeah. So contractual services, the, part of that contractual service is purchase power. So, part of that contractual service is purchase power.
Okay,
So that purchase power is $42 million projected this year. And again, that was we're anticipating a very high projection because of when we did the projections.
okay,
But that is a $13 million increase. Our fuel for coal, natural gas, that's a $5.6 million increase. And freight increases, you're right.
It tripled.
It's almost a $5 million increase. So obviously, we ship a lot of stuff.
yeah,
Material coming in and shipping stuff out. So with that, both UPS and FedEx told us they're going to have an 8% increase this year. So that's
Wow.
reflected in our freight numbers. A lot of our freight is FedEx and UPS,
Okay.
whether it's a delivery charge and, we order equipment or material, we get it delivered, we're still paying that charge. So that's where
Clearly.
some of those increases are coming from, yes.
Thank you, Scott, for that.
One other thing on that, the decommissioning of Dolman, that is a commodity contract charge also. So there's about $4.5, $5 million in that too.
Okay, just two more. And then also looking at the engineering department of the electric budget, what is the purchase power and why is it increasing from 26 million to 39 million? And I put a reference in there too, page 285. This is also page 17 of 30 under the CWLP expenditure budget detail section.
So purchase power is when you look at during the summer, keep forgetting. If you look like during the summer, we hedge power. So
Okay,
we will buy power with only Unit 4 and Interstate. We can cover our load. But if we can get power and we can purchase power ahead of time, that is cheaper than what we project Interstate to be, we will purchase that power. And then in addition to that, we take a lot of power real time or day ahead. If we, for example, we make projections every day of what our load's gonna be. If we miss that projection, we have to buy power on real time. Or if we know we're gonna be short and we get it in a day ahead. So there's, that is an ebb and flow daily of purchase power. And again, when we
sounds
did-
like the stock market.
It is. And when we did those projections, again, that purchase power prices were averaging $70, $80, $90 in the winter months.
Okay.
And $60, $70 in the summer. And so those are starting to come down. So we don't anticipate that unless there is some astronomical reason that happened last year with natural gas,
Okay,
which drives energy prices for the most part.
gotcha.
Let me just follow up too. I want to, because I know that's a big thing with those categories increasing.
Yeah.
But one thing that's not really been discussed as much, I mean, we've showed it in the past, but with the retirement of the units, the cost savings though, I mean, we've got the cost from the units going down, but we have purchase power and other stuff going up, but the difference between it all is still a savings. So it's still a savings to our customers overall, and that's why our bills are overall low. But, I mean, you're still gonna see those cost impacts with fuel adjustments fluctuate more wildly now because we're exposed. So it's not just when when Unit 4 Interstate can cover our load. Interstate's an expensive unit to run sometimes. It depends on the price of natural gas. And then the same thing with energy prices going into the electric market. Those things can fluctuate and it changes those items.
To give you an idea, that in December, when we had that cold,
Sorry that I'm pointing at you, but I already know he gonna say it.
in December, when we had that cold snap, there was one short period, I think it was on Christmas Eve. Power prices were over almost $1,000 a megawatt hour. Where normally they were running, at that time they were running in $100. Something happened in the system and it was over $1,000 a megawatt hour. So those are the variations that we see daily, and even, it's done on a 5-minute interval now, which is crazy. So if you want to drive yourself crazy, you can go watch it every 5 minutes if you like, but it is crazy watching it.
Thank you so much for that. And there is a lot of changes happening in the permanent improvements within the engineering department of the electric budget. Can you just describe what are you proposing there? And do you need my page number? It was page 287, and this is also page 19 of 30 of the CWLP expenditure budget detail section.
And what was the page number of the expenditure section you said?
19 of 30.
19 of 30?
So I can tell you from a capital standpoint for projects, a big portion of our capital this year was $9.5 million from ERIRF, which is it was $9.5 million, which is the fund we have for environmental remediation projects, so the Lime Lagoons. So that's a big portion of it. That was $9.5 million that goes from there. So it's really a net zero. We have a set-aside fund for ERIRF, so we take that money out as a revenue source or as a resource, and then we have the expenses under it. So those end up being net. That was a big portion. Looking at some of our other capacitor
Capacitor banks too.
Yeah, I mean, we've got capacitor banks, some of the capital projects I showed from substations and relays. So there is $7.6 million increase in our capital from last year.
Okay.
And some of that is different projects going back and forth.
Scott, does any of that roll over too?
Yeah, well, as Todd showed on his slide, so this fiscal for the ERIF for the Lime Lagoons, 9.5 million. That total project cost is 17.45.
Okay.
Some of that was expended last year. We started some engineering and stuff last year. Major construction started this year. It'll finish next year.
Got you.
But yeah, those will be ongoing.
And my final thought is that I'm a little concerned when I saw that number, 37% of potential people to retire, like they'll be just at that point where they can. I share everything that you all put on your page, but more recruitment and, asking people to come and interview or giving some type of detail. What is your strategy for getting more employees to come into the department? Because what if you do have a large amount of people leave at that time?
Again, it's basically having a succession plan in place, and I don't know, it's been a couple of years that the mayor and I have worked on that, and especially it needs to be constantly updated anymore, it seems like. But we do that for the top jobs, to keep our, that's my focus, but the focus is having the departments look at that. And there's some things, there's only so much we can do in certain areas, like apprentices. There's only like linemen. We can only hire so many linemen because you got to have the correct ratio for the journeyman to the apprentice ratio. Otherwise, they can't really get their learning hours in. So those are kind of some restrictions. But recruiting in general, I mean, that's truly an HR function. It's not something that like the directors that we have, the supervisors, superintendents have. They've got their normal jobs. They're really, doing everything they can just to get their job done. To do more would be requiring us to have more people, really. I mean, the way I see it is having additional people that could focus on recruitment and those kinds of things. And maybe that's more of a city function instead of just us, but I think there's value in having more people to do that kind of work right now.
Okay. Well, thank you, and that concludes my questions.
Alderman Donlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing that it's past 7 o'clock, I'm going to take a little bit of different approach here. While going through the book, it had several questions regarding specific line items. Sure. I'm not going to ask those because I think when you provide the explanations that Alderman Hanauer asked for earlier, I think that'll probably answer a lot of my questions. So I'm not going to go line by line and do okay. that. But I do have a couple of questions about some specifics that were in the presentation this evening. And you mentioned that there's going to be some type of water taste study. How much is that going to cost?
The cost was $250. Wasn't that the original cost? The ordinance?
Yeah, so CMT has already been commissioned to do that study. That was an ordinance that came through.
I remember.
3 or 4 months ago. It was $193,000. It was originally budgeted for ARPA funding at $250, but that's where the price came in on the RFP.
Lower.
Yeah, that doesn't happen every day, does it?
And then on the in the slideshow presentation, I don't have my glasses, so I couldn't tell you what it looks like. Maybe slide 20, but anyway, no, all right, no, thank you. And it says at the bottom, broadband 1.5 million. Oh. And then you mentioned something about for I3 broadband. Tell me we're not going to spend money and then turn it over to a private company.
That money, basically, it's installing fiber.
Right.
And the way I understand it, the initiative is more for it to turn, basically to have I3 broadband have access to our dark fiber, so that way they can then, I think, build off of that in the east side community, really, and offer, I guess, broadband for lower income residents. Why wouldn't we do it ourselves? Why would we rely on? I mean, we have fiber. We wouldn't be able to do broadband, as
You mean to individual residences, we would not be able to, we just don't run the
Right, right.
transmission.
And we don't offer broadband now, even for businesses. We offer
I understand.
lighted fiber or dark fiber, and that's the extent of our services. In order to offer broadband of any kind, we'd have to have probably a separate enterprise fund and compete with Comcast and
Right.
i3 broadband, which we probably would never be able to do.
I get asked that question a lot. I mean, not a lot, but, a few times a year. So it says 1.5 million of ARPA plus 1.5 million of matching. What's that mean? Where's the matching coming from?
It'd be from the electric fund. It's just cash that we have, that's on the books.
Okay, so it's essentially a new program, not picking on anything in specific, but I'm just trying to, okay, here's why I'm asking the question.
Sure.
Some months ago, I was contacted by a resident off of Bruns Lane, and it's on Dawn Drive, and I received a video from this individual, and you've all seen it. I got it here on my phone, pulled up.
Oh, yeah.
It shows somebody's sink, and when you play the video, I will just push it now, it shows essentially dirt coming out of this individual's faucet. And I got in touch with Todd, and he got right back to me, really appreciated it, and gave an estimate of what the issue that is, and I hate to get so specific on a project, but I am.
Sure.
The issue is that it's an older line, it's the end of a line, and sediment builds up, and if the CWP doesn't come out on a regular basis and flush the lines, this is what happens. And please tell me this is in the budget to make those improvements.
And that's for.
Because that's what I was
Valley View,
told
right?
by the mayor's office.
Yes, so phase one of that project is in the budget for $500,000 currently. To replace that entire subdivision, it is a $1.6 million project. There's some question, timing-wise, whether we could complete the entirety of the project in the fiscal year.
Is it not possible to do it all at once? I mean, that's a reasonable
Probably
answer.
not.
Okay.
But that would get you a third of it. I mean, the objective would be to try to do a third over the next 3 years.
I'm not picking on you, but I'm going to ask you, is this acceptable in the city of Springfield?
No, it is not.
Oh, it's not.
It is
That's it.
corrosion.
It's not acceptable.
Right.
So I appreciate the efforts. If it has to be phased in over a reasonable amount of time, that makes sense to me. But when we have money like we've never had before, and I'm not talking about the water fund specifically, I'm talking about citywide, and we create new programs over here that are fluffy, whatever, this is unacceptable. And I know others at this horseshoe will feel that way. I've shared this video with almost everybody. You probably are all tired of seeing it, whoever's seen it. But the fact that the fact that it's going to be phased in, I think, is reasonable if you can't do it all at once. If you could, if you had the money, is that even possible?
It would be very difficult to complete that entire project in one fiscal year, given the resources we currently have.
Okay.
I'm talking about doing all the service taps and the crew commitments with lead service lines and other things.
It would be too much of a disruption, is what you're
It
saying.
would, and the amount of disruption in that subdivision would be massive.
Well, Todd, I think that's an acceptable answer, and I appreciate you you always do. You always get right back with me. You're very upfront. I just can't drive it home enough. I don't care where it is. It doesn't have to be just in my ward. I just couldn't believe it. So if others have this type of problem, please get together with him. Obviously, we can make a difference by making sure it's in the budget. But if more can be done, and if you need to talk about it offline, if we need to talk about it with the mayor, I know he's been more than cooperative as far as discussing this. If we need to amend the budget and put more in,
Right.
logistically, to make it happen faster, let's do it, because I tell you what, if this was my house, I'd be calling every single day. These people have been more than patient, and we need to address it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Redpath.
Just before I start mine, I want to follow up on Alderman Donlin. So what is the safety of that water? Do you test that water?
So, yeah, what that is iron corrosion. There is no water quality issues with it other than the aesthetics, but it is unlined cast iron pipe that was installed in the early 1950s, and on occasion, depending upon where the pipe was batched out of, sometimes it corrodes at a faster rate than other product lines that came out in, I guess, subsequent years. So there's no water quality issue with it or safety issue with it. It is a purely aesthetics issue, but I agree. I'm not retracting from what I said. I agree it's unacceptable.
I understand it, Todd, and not to beat on you, but the thing is that water's black. It's completely black when it comes out, and you know that. It's
I have
just
seen the
that
video, yeah.
I agree with Alderman Donlin. This is an issue that if we have to move it up on the scale and find some other money, we need to do that.
Okay.
So while you're here, I'll start
All
with
right,
water.
sure.
So have we been, I know that we sell water to Chatham on a regular basis, 4 or 5 times a year maybe?
Yeah, I think regular would be a little strong for a word, but yeah, intermittently, when they have emergencies, we have sold them water, probably, I get the exact number wrong, but 2 or 3, 4 times this year.
My ward butts up to Chatham, it butts up to Rochester, but I get calls regularly from citizens out there that are really upset with their water system, and that's not our fault, but has there been any talks with them about reselling them water from our distribution system?
No official talks, but we have talked unofficially, yes.
I've had a couple city council members take me to lunch and tell me the whole story, and there's a divide in their group out there, and
Sure.
That's their battle. But I just was curious on if that's something that we're looking at.
Yeah, we have the capacity and the infrastructure there is there. If they desire to come back to the city of Springfield, we would welcome them back as a customer.
I mean, $12 or $14 water rates compared to $68 water rates for them. I mean, they're the highest in the state.
Right, and I mean, part of their problem, and talking to the mayor out there on occasion, is that they have a sunk amount of cost into that plant out there, and they've got some concerns on how they finance that and pay off those notes along with coming back to the city of Springfield. We think it's feasible, and we think they could actually, there would be value to them in coming back to the city of Springfield, and obviously we think our product is superior to what
And we
they're receiving now.
diverted Rochester for getting off our system by negotiating with them on a couple of years back, if I recall.
Yeah, originally they were going to team with Rochester, right?
So the water rate's in tough times right now, and I know that. You and I talk regularly about it, and we're going to get through this budget session with in tough times. But here's the pending question and the looming answer. There's got to be a water rate increase coming. It may not come until later this spring, later this summer, but there's one coming, right?
Yeah, what we're doing, I think I made this point last year, $1.64 for 748 gallons is just no longer sustainable. It's no longer feasible. It's not just us. Nobody could sell water at that price and maintain a best-in-class water department.
I get that part. And so what would be a proposed rate increase that would be possibly coming the way to the ratepayers?
So I think, our plan really is to go through all these things that Todd was presenting on, a lot of the infrastructure needs, and kind of a line item by line item, and then present that as far as what the impacts would be for what a potential rate increase would be is to fund that kind of infrastructure, put that in front of the city council essentially, and make a decision on what we want to pursue. There's going to be a lot of varying things like that, but that's where I kind of see it, unfolding, of course. We'll have to, be working with the mayor to figure out what that plan might look like. But that's kind of the intent of what we plan to do. We don't really have figures or anything like that drawn up yet. But we know it's coming, and we've done everything we can to cut the budget. We wanted to make that really clear and paint that picture that we've done everything we can. We've reduced headcount as much as we can without impacting services. In fact, I think we will impact services by cutting the temporary labor that we use every summer out of lake services, but we don't have a choice.
Yeah, and you do, and it is going to impact services. Because it's going to cut into lake services, which cuts into the service to the lake.
Right.
And that means that That means that projects that are supposed to go on out there about culvert replacement and the new, trying to put the new sewer system in, which is not a cost that's going to be affected by you guys, but it's going to be a cost that's going to, the sanitary district, the city, and the homeowners are going to be able to try to buy in. And right now, that cost for a couple of them is about $7,600 is what one guy told me his tap-on fee is going to be. So the deteriorating sewer system, the deteriorating septic systems out there, people have been waiting in line before, there's a lot of them getting ready to go under. And I can tell you that there's a lot of people that have been waiting because they don't want to spend the $30,000 to put a new septic system in if they're going to be put on our system. And if we're not going to continue this, and what I've been told by the Public Works Director is we don't really have the money to continue it this year. I know that we got the engineering thing out there from Martin Engineering, and that went out to them last year. So we should have some kind of idea on how this is going to work. I know by talking to the sanitary district that the way they do it is they drill those pipes. It's not about a lot of digging, they're drilling them. So it's a different situation than laying out, digging big ditches and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's small diameter, low pressure forced sewer, so it's all directionally bored.
But there is an urgency, Director, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Right.
There's an urgency because they are leaking. They're leaking into our lake. And the bottom line is that we started this program, and we're doing Linden Lane and Hawthorne is the first ones we're doing. But we already have some smaller subdivisions out there that are ready to be tapped onto without engineering. It's already to the street is all they have to do, and to tap in. So why aren't we reaching down and getting some of the ARPA money to continue this program? We can't stop. There's too many to go.
Right, there's about 200 left out there. After the 67 on Linden and Hawthorne Lane are completed, which is significant progress, but I agree it's a priority and it was in the long-term future.
And I know the mayor agrees with me on this. He's heard it from the Lake Homeowners Association as I have. He's heard it from the homeowners. We're only doing a few streets this year on overlays because of short money that we have. I get it. I see we're buying equipment for the grappling trucks and the other trucks, which we absolutely need, because in addition to doing lake services work, we're going to use those grappling trucks to try back up some of the public works projects, if I understand that, if that's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. And just, I guess, a point of order here, those are funded by the electric fund, that entire crew. So
Sometimes I get them mixed up. Yeah. So where is Martin Engineering on their study?
I can't answer that. That is being administered out of the Public Works Department, so I don't know where they're at on their final contract drawings.
They've had it for quite a long time. They've had it
Correct.
since last year's budget, but I'm not making accusations or anything. I just want to know where we are and how much we have to find money for to continue this program this year so we can tap those on. And one final question for the director, if I could. So when we're doing rebuilds on our electric system, if we're on an overhead and we're rebuilding, is it possible to move to underground, or is it too much cost to make a change? If we're rebuilding our infrastructure on the high lines, wouldn't it be more efficient to start putting them underground?
Those overheads are downtown or around that area or no?
It depends on what area you're talking about.
Well, you know what, it's a general question for,
Sure.
You go down and see the new subdivisions that are going out in different areas, at my area out west, and wherever they're building new subdivisions, most of them are going underground. So
Correct.
Is it an opportunity when we're doing a rebuild to switch to an underground system?
It is an opportunity, and again, it depends on the area because it depends on what's in the ground that we have to get around.
So is it a lot more money to do that?
It is more expensive, absolutely. And part of the other problem with that is, as you've seen in some of the older areas out west that we're starting to rebuild now, when you go in there, you do a significant amount of damage to yards that we have to go back and address. It's not easy to rebuild it after you put it in either.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Hanauer.
Thank you. I had a whole bunch, but in the interest of time, I might send you an email with some of them, but,
Or call me.
yeah. After seeing the video that Alderman Donelan showed, it is troubling that we have that. And, you know, I look and I see the broadband. I guess the question I have is, have we ever subsidized or given the broadband to AT&T or Comcast or anybody like that? Why are we subsidizing a new business in town? You know, the east side, where if you're going east to west or whatever, west to east, Comcast is everywhere. And they can provide broadband. And we're spending 1.5 of ARPA money on a new program. That concerns me. But more than that, we're spending $1.5 million of our ratepayers' money to do something that Comcast has out there. AT&T's running fiber in town. What's next? Are we going to help them with fiber? Or are we going to help? You know, I'm all for when we got fiber going to places that we lease it to people, you know, to the businesses, and we lease it to the state. I used to work for the state, and I know about, you know, the fiber that we leased, you know, and it's kind of, but I don't know that I like this, especially when I know that Comcast is out there. And I think what we're doing is we're going to get ourselves in a pickle where other businesses that want to come in and run broadband are going to say, well, you did it for these guys, well, you're going to do it for us. And it's saving them $3 million. You know, especially when, quite honestly, I'm more apt to put an amendment in and cut that 1.5 in ARPA to that project and send it over to water so that they can get this done. Because I'll tell you what's going to happen. Next year, it's just going to be one more problem finding money. And when we got problems like this, we shouldn't be starting new programs. I disagree with that, especially with the ARPA money. We should not be starting new programs. So that's my point on there. I do have a question about when we closed. I better use the microphone so I don't get yelled at. When we closed 33, we were told that there's going to be substantial savings. How many employees did we end up that ended up getting terminated on 33?
4 that impacted, but then we hired 2 back.
Yeah,
How much?
There was 4 terminations originally, and then 2 of them got hired back. So the end was 2.
But did the others go to other places in the plant, or did they go around the city?
There was a combination.
I will tell you why I ask, because I'm on the personal services. We've got you got a reduction of about 1.2 million, and given the salaries out there, that's not a lot of money for what we gave up.
Well, you got to realize that was probably done over like 3 fiscals. You know, we started with attrition. Prior to the units closing, people were retiring. There was quite a few that were actually retiring. We were kind of shocked once we worked through it all.
We only did it over 2 fiscal years, Doug, because we didn't know we were going to close it until we got the information on the turbine. Then that's when we decided not to.
Well, your numbers were 31, 32, and 33.
I'm looking at 30.
Oh, just 33.
33.
Well, that was the least amount of impact then.
Yeah, 33 was a minimal amount of impact compared to 31, 32.
I thought we were going to lose 84 people in 33.
Total, no, that was total. So we started 100, it's been a while since I looked at those numbers. roughly 70 people
All right.
total. That was all 3 units. We did start, as Doug said, in I believe it was FY19, as people were retiring from management. We already started consolidating and started not filling those positions. And then once we closed 3132, we held them to the end of the fiscal of 2020, I believe. I have to go back to look at dates.
Okay.
And then 33 was the end of fiscal 2021. And
Okay.
at that point, some people had left. We had individuals that were transferring to other departments, individuals quitting, going to take other jobs.
But my point, when they transfer to another department, that number should be higher, is what I think. That's just my opinion. I'm not gonna sit here and argue with you
Sure.
all night. It's getting late and, you know.
We can look at that a little deeper. Part of
Interesting
that
to
also
see.
is an all-in number.
Right.
So what are insurance costs doing? What is IMRF costs doing?
Yeah.
So those could be increasing, offsetting some of that.
Right.
In addition, as the
What was the number of operators on 33?
9,
Or
well, between the two,
Well, we'll deal with that. I've got a couple other questions that.
roughly 20.
I mean, because, the number that stayed within the electric department is probably very minimal. I mean, as far as that goes, there's a lot of, with the Lake Services, Public Works, to the water plant, and then leaving employment as well. So, and then we, working through some of the systems that we had to keep maintaining, it was decided that we wanted to keep a few of them too, kind of on some of the equipment that kind of involves the 33 scrubber area.
Yeah. Okay, to switch subjects here, we've got a solar array that people can prescribe to, right? We still have that out in Ward 9,
Yes.
I believe? Mm-hmm. How are we doing on, is it full?
No, the last I checked, it's been a while, it was about 66% subscribed. And I don't think we would do it anything else anyway right now with that specific item, because it was, if we're gonna build something, it's gonna be big. It's gonna be big.
I understand that, but the interesting part about it is we do have a lot of people contact us about more solar, and my question is, it would be interesting to see, I thought that it would be 100% by now. Because it's an option, if people want solar, that's an option they can do, and of course, their cost will be based on the
Right.
the cost in that, right?
And it's still an option for people, but when you start talking, and that was kind of pre-utility scale.
Right.
Type, looks, and I can't remember exactly what year that was when we started that program. But it's so much cheaper now. If we were to go out and build a 50 megawatt, 100 megawatt solar farm, there's no comparison.
Right.
And the cost effectiveness of that. And when you start building that scale, that's gonna benefit everybody across the city. And then people aren't probably gonna be too concerned with buying a small fraction, off a tiny little area.
And then, the ERP that we're putting in place, what, does that replace like the ARIA system and all that? Does anybody know, I know what the ARIA system is, one that I'm aware of, that
familiar with that.
we keep all our debts in and all that, does that?
No, right now it won't. Right now it won't replace that system, no.
It will
But
not.
but otherwise across the city, our finance system, budget, all the things Doug mentioned earlier, that's what it'll impact. So it casts a pretty wide net.
Okay. And then finally, I've got others, but one other thing that I just say is, we have the beach house out at the lake. I had the opportunity to go, if you haven't had the opportunity, there's the old beach house out on Lake Decatur. They've got a really nice restaurant. I don't know how they've done it, if it's a privatized deal, they sold it, I have no idea. But what they did, it's amazing over there. And if you have the opportunity to go over, we need to look and we need to see how they did it, because, one of the largest complaints I hear is what, we got to do something with this beach house.
You know what? We're constantly doing that, Ralph. We're
right.
trying, we'll take any offer we can get for somebody to come out there and use that thing. I'm not kidding you. They constantly.
Well, I'm just saying look at Decatur and see how they did it, I've got other questions
Totally
on the
agree.
line
I mean,
items. I'll look for your,
that's a good thing to go look at.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got my own ideas, personally. I shared them with Ward 1 meeting. I personally think there should be a winery out there to start out with, and then have food trucks. And when they start turning a profit, then they reinvest in the building to turn it into more of a restaurant type style. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you.
You're just a wino, that's
I'm not too much of a
Alderwoman-
wine.
different ways.
Back on track. Alderwoman Conley.
I was fine with the wine conversation. Dry January is over. So I'm also going to cut out some of my more nitpicky questions. Doug, I'll email those to you. But I have had people contact me. So this is more of a comment probably or an inquiry. But we do still have residents that are struggling to make CWLP payments for their electrical. I get concerns from people, on a fairly regular basis, hey, I've got this big bill, I've got to get it paid, I'm going to get shut off. I'm always, talk to CWLP, make sure you get in touch with them and have a plan. But I just want to make sure it's difficult for people to have to come to their alderwoman for that kind of information. If there's any sort of additional outreach you can do about the services and ways that people who are, residents who are in danger of being shut off because they've, bills are still continuing to increase. I mean, I understand it. The one person that I talked to was saying that they've had such an increase in their food bill that their CWLP bill is got shuffled to the side. And so now they're looking at really some very difficult decisions. I mean, the one protein that used to be easy that you could give your kids, eggs, my goodness, have gone up so much exponentially. So there are real concerns with residents about being able to make those electrical payments. And, I know we have businesses that get behind on their bills too, but, at the residential level, that level of that outreach and just whatever you can do with inserts or with those redlined CWLP bills, and I know you do as much as you can. I just want to again make that point. There are people who are really having concerns and juggling with increasing, especially food expenses, making some very difficult decisions right now. So just kind of putting that out there because I said I would. But then to some of my questions. First of all, we had a lot of conversations around these ARPA funds. And I thought, especially at one of our special meetings that we held just specifically to talk about this, the septic systems on the lake was a huge topic and a major concern. That's not a Ward 1 issue. Alderman Redpath, I apologize, but it's not just yours. Everyone in this city gets drinking water from that lake. And the fact that we continue to have aging septic systems on the lake is a huge infrastructure concern. So I would like to see something, and I know you guys put a lot of work into this, but I would like a little more information on what sort of costs it would take and how much more, what capacity we have to make more inroads into getting people off of those septic systems. To me, it's a critical way to protect our drinking water supply. That in addition to dredging, which I'm
Alderman Conley, I think that's more in line with the Public Works Department. They work with the sewers.
I agree, but I think I want to make sure that we have CWLP at the table because we have a water division that clearly is stretched to the limits right now. And I just want to make sure that, I'm going to say this as often as I can because the sewer conversation is huge. Protecting our drinking water supply is just as big. And you do mention in here in long-term plans, you talk about dredging. When's the last time we've dredged the lake?
It was in the 80s. It was 86, 88, yeah.
It was about my second
So,
term.
and that was just south and west of I-55. It was just
and
that
that's-
part of the lake.
So
Hey,
when
Chuck,
we
you just
talk
got up there.
sorry?
I was saying Chuck had just got on city council at that time.
Stay on task. Let's stay on
Was that his
task.
first time or second time?
Let's stay on task. It's late. I'm trying to go.
So my concern is routine, regular maintenance of, again, one of our really biggest resources in this community. I'm encouraged to see that that's in the plan. I'd like to see more numbers around that.
Right.
And you don't have to give them now, Todd,
No, and-
because you didn't,
Yeah,
unless you have them.
we don't have a number to
Okay.
dredge the entire lake. I mean, that particular project could take any number of looks. You know, we did west and south of 55 back in the 80s.
I mean, I was still young in the 80s.
And, what's that?
I was young in the 80s,
Right,
so,
right.
yeah.
And then, you know, you've got a lot of surface area north and east of 55. But just to give you a frame of reference, it's just to do the whole thing, it's a huge, huge capital expense. So we're bringing in somewhere just shy of $30 million in operating revenues. Lake Decatur dredged their lake. It's 2/3 the surface area of ours. And this is back 2, 3, 4 years ago, pre-big inflation dollars. And they were over $100 million to do
Right.
that lake.
And I get it. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that, you know, we should be doing that in the next,
Right.
that we should have that this year. But I will say again, we're looking at deferred maintenance of one of our really richest resources in the community. You have a tough job. And I will say I was shocked to see the chemical expenses and the astronomical increase that's taken. I mean, I don't envy you what you have to do to balance those out, but I do think we need to have, at some point, we need to have a reasonable implementation plan for how we're going to be addressing some of that sedimentation of our lake and what that dredging will look like, and not all at once, but what it looks like to do smaller bites of that 100 million, we'll say 100 million project.
No, I agree. I agree that dredging is a critical part of our overall plan moving forward. And, you know, it's a piece we have to do to be a best-in-class water utility.
Absolutely, and that along with the septic, I mean, I really, that is a big, we need to make sure that we're protecting the drinking water of our community, because I'd like to see, you know, as Springfield grows and expands, that those demands for our drinking water will increase, and then, you know, you'll just be flush with cash or resources and job responsibilities. So, I also made notes as we went through. I'm gonna, my line notes we'll get to later. Yeah, I guess the I-3 project. Was this bid out to have I-3 be the vendor that's gonna be the recipient of this $3 million?
I'm not really involved in the conversations with that.
Who
directly.
is? Because this is, I haven't really heard a whole lot about this either.
It was basically just, I mean, I was a couple of years ago, maybe a little bit.
Okay.
But not really more recently.
Okay, then that's fine.
That's really all I can say at this time.
Then I will just say, for the record, for anyone who's not had to deal with I-3, their contractor quality has gone down. They continue to be, the work that they do and the damage they do to people's yards continues to be one of the top complaints I get from Ward 8. They've recently moved into the Washington Park neighborhood, and I have constituents there who are deeply concerned about losing some of the beautiful trees that are part of the you know, the real attraction of that neighborhood. So, yeah. If you've got input in that, I'd love to hear it.
I can't speak to this project specifically, but I did have a conversation in a different capacity regarding that. So I know that there is a push somewhere to get broadband services to the east side of Springfield. And that those contract, well, see, I don't think Comcast is true fiber though. I think it's
Correct.
their,
Coax.
yeah, coax. So they're not a true broadband system. And from what I understand, and some of this is speculation, is that AT&T and I3 are not going to fund that project on their own. They're going to piggyback off someone if the city wanted to provide services to, say, the east side of town. So
Okay, and that's a different situation. I'm just,
Right, but I'm not sure of that.
when we have one single company being named as part of a $3 million project for the city, I mean, obviously, the first question that comes to mind is, when was this bid out? I mean, how did this process get developed? So, thank you for that. I do understand the differences there. I3 has just been, again, the number of complaints I get about this, and that's not you guys. So, and since Doug, you said you weren't in that conversation, I won't
Can I
labor
follow
that.
up on that real quick? Would you mind?
Well, I might be able to answer the
One second.
question. We're waiting turns.
Yep.
We're waiting turns.
I just,
Alderwoman Conley.
quick question, the lead service line inventory with the ARPA funds project, will that result in a full assessment of the entire city's lead lines?
Not quite, right?
No, it won't make it all the way around the city. There's, for the $1 million, it would do 4,000 of the 10,000 suspected lead service lines. We do intend with our internal crews on continuing that work after the ARPA money has been expended. The thought process right now is we know the core of the city that was built, way pre-1930 is solid lead, so we're working around the edges where it could be in or out of that suspect lead material. And we're kind of working our way into the center of the city, trying to shore up that inventory.
And you've explained this before, and I just realized I've never asked how much of the city that this ARPA project would cover. And I think you've also said in the past, you're looking at areas with like daycares and.
Yeah, that what I just described was the materials inventory, just verifying that service line is lead.
Okay.
But yeah, as far as the lead service line replacement project, which is a different project, that project, we have set out with a goal of 300 lead service line replacements this year. So, I mean, historically, like you said, we started with daycares, licensed daycares, and then we've kind of tried to move to underserved areas of the city first. And that's going to be part of the formula that the EPA is going to use to give out these grants.
Right.
And really the methodology there is it's a combined effort. Our crews are doing the service line from the main to basically the property line, meter pit or curb stop, and then we're using the grant funds for a private plumbing contractor to replace the customer's portion. And that's a bigger question, when we get to talk some of these long-term budget things and increases and whatnot, is that's a question all among itself is how we're going to treat that long-term when the grant funding goes away, because right now the U.S. EPA has earmarked $11.1 billion for lead service line replacements nationally, but it's just a small amount of what's needed.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I mean, this is drinking water, which is
Yes.
such a critical thing. And,
Yeah.
and when it's something like that impacts
Right.
children the most and long-term learning abilities. I mean, I really appreciate that you've kept a good focus on that.
And this program is progressive. There's many utilities out there. They're not in Illinois. They're not going to start until 2027 when it's mandated. So.
Well, I very much appreciate that this has been a priority now and continues to be. So thank you for that. And then just real quickly, because I don't know that I quite picked this up or followed it, but when you're talking about the water main replacement program, when we're looking at a 1% replacement per year, which is about $10 million a year, is that correct? How much do we actually have budgeted for this year?
So there's about a mile worth of main replacement in this year's budget, and that's been, under the last few years, that's been pretty typical, is about 1/10 to 2/10% of the mains being replaced each year, and it is due to lack of funding to replace that $7.6 million, or 7.6 miles of main. It's a $10 million lift each year. It's a big lift, but, I mean, that would be the goal ultimately, to replace main at that rate.
So we're doing, instead of 1%, we're doing about 0.2%?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So how much, so we're, $2 million a year then?
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good,
About that?
accurate guess, yep.
Okay. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Appreciate it very much for all your answers, too.
Mayor Langfeder?
Yeah, that's what I like about Todd. So if you come back up to the podium.
How'd you keep trying to sit down?
I do, I keep
It's,
trying to sit down.
With regards to what Alderman Donlin spoke to, I think that project's $1 million, correct?
1.6.
$1.6 million.
Okay. And then I thought we put $1 million of ARPA into that. Is that not correct?
Earmark for that project, there's 500,000 currently, yeah.
So we probably need to put $1 million. So with regards to that, the phasing, that's news to me. I thought we'd do it all at once, but you said that'd be a disruption to the neighborhood?
Well, it would be both a huge disruption to the neighborhood, and it would also be a timing thing, whether we could get all that work done in one fiscal year.
So if you outsourced it, I mean, is that a possibility? And
We would
that
outsource,
expedite
we would
things?
have to outsource quite a bit of the main installation, some of the taps and whatnot we'd have to do internally with our service crews.
Because if we haven't done so, we should just get a bid on the project, then we know for sure, and the time schedule, that'd be helpful. So with that, that was it on that, because that was a priority in the budget. With regards to broadband, since that's a target of interest, this was actually Doug hit on it a few years ago. This is pre-pandemic. We talked about broadband, and I3 broadband was coming into our community. We had a discussion with them, and of course, they're all out the west side. We said, why aren't you doing the east side? Money in houses. So that's where the capitalists go to, the richer areas of our community, which, I understand that, it's all about competition. So pre-pandemic, we had discussions with AT&T, Comcast, I3 broadband. Those were the three providers. AT&T, they want to do Wi-Fi, that's how they want to do their coverage in areas, because it's all your cell phone usage. They don't want to invest money in hard infrastructure. Comcast, I think it was mentioned, is a coaxial cable, and then it goes to multiple households, but the digital divide doesn't improve. I3 broadband, we did talk to them, and we said, well, what would the value be if you ran our infrastructure to the houses? Is there an offset? So they really didn't come with the proposal. They weren't interested in that. Well, after all the ARPA funds come, of course, everybody has interest because they want it, right? But that would be a bid process, but we're still trying to figure out how to proceed, because I think someone mentioned this is a new program. No, we're building out our fiber. We have fiber. We're building it out to 40 gig capacity. So when people compare Springfield to other communities like Nashville and others, that's what they promote. They promote fiber. And for young people, what they want is fiber. So when they want to go downtown or any development area, that's what they look at, because they want high-speed access to the internet, to the the educational world. So that's what this whole project is about. So we did put in $1.5 million, and there's flexibility in there, but we wanted to put that number in. We matched it with the electric fund so we could build out our fiber, because we all want economic development, and that's one of the drivers is economic development. And the reason for the east side, multiple reasons. You have a digital divide where children did not have access to the internet like other children did in our community. So we're all about fairness, and we all want equal services, and we know the capitalistic society is not providing it. That's when government has to step in. So we've done it on our utility side. Thank God for our utility, because they have that access. So we're trying to do it on the fiber side as well. It lends itself for economic development opportunities, and when you're looking at distressed areas, that's the greatest resource, and we've talked about this. You rebuild your neighborhoods, and one of the fastest ways, or another way to do it, is through our broadband. The other side impact of it is with smart technology. I mean, everybody talks about LED lighting, smart meters, all that. That leads into all this. So how do you integrate it all together? And you have to have that hard infrastructure. So that goes into more of that, but we have to come back before the council with a proposal, with the bids, if we do that. But still, we're trying to work our way through it. The state of Illinois did give us a technology grant. We had a presentation with the members of our community that gave that presentation, and so that was presented. The next step is, okay, in this area of need, how do we move forward with it? So that's why that's there. But it's not for I3 broadband, because they had their chance, but they could bid on it, and we'll see what how it's all structured. So we'll see where that takes us. But the next was with regards to the lake sewers. We're in agreement with how do you make sure you have lake sewers around the lake. The lake sewer plans, they're supposed to be done I thought they started, was it last January or this January? Last January?
A year ago.
So they should be done by now, but I didn't get a reply back. So we'll have to ask Adam Pillai. He's the head of the Lake Clubs Association. He works for Martin Engineering, so he knows the importance of doing that. But the reason you do that plan is so now we can put it out for bid for grants. So that's what we want to do, is leverage that. We'll be shovel ready. So there's a lot of grants out there. That's what we're trying to get to that point. I think there's I thought there's $1 million in the sewer fund for that, but to the continuation. So we will see. But we should have asked Nate when he was up here last night, I think it was. So those are the two items on that. With regards to Chatham Water, we did have a proposal. We did talk to the mayor previously, and this was under the Ted Meckes era, not under the Todd LaFountain area, so hopefully Todd brings it to the finish line. But we showed at that point in time how they could come back and it'd be a wash, and it actually would save them money in the long run. But, they don't want to, at that time, they didn't want to do it. But times have changed. There's a lot of infrastructure needs, and we just saw millions and millions and millions of dollars. So we saw they are paying the highest rate, so it would make sense for them to come back. And so we will get a hard proposal out to them and make that offer. And if they don't want to do it, that's fine. But there is going, just like utility charges, we talked about the Wyndham, right? Demand charge. You build out your infrastructure. Well, right now, we just pretty much charge them for the water, I think, the usage, and a little bit of not much of a demand charge. We're building into that offer. If they don't come back to Springfield, they need to pay a demand charge because we built the infrastructure. So it's like you get to use that for free. We're going to start charging a monthly fee, and then you pay the water usage if you ever have to use it. But to have that access to our water system, it's a value. So we are going to address that situation, because if Chatham comes back, it resolves the issue with the budget of the water fund, because I think it's $1 million a year. Is that what Chatham means to the city of Springfield in revenues?
It's probably roughly.
About $1 million a year. So that's pretty significant. And we are a regional supplier of water. So unfortunately, that horse is out the barn, because if this administration was in during that time, Chatham would not have left. With regards to water rates and just maintenance, this is the overall water resource. And I appreciate your comments, Alderman, but we do need to get that record of decision, because if we flinch on that, that goes by the wayside. We have too much invested not to get the record of decision from the Army Corps of Engineers this year. So we need to get that record of decision. And again, they have to give us a backup water supply. So if they say no to Hunter Lake, then they have to give us the backup, because you have to have a backup. So with regards to that, that's when you do the water rate assessment. What do you actually need? And, I know Don Hanrahan won't like me saying this, or others in the audience, but if the Army Corps gives us the Lake 2 permit, we move that direction, then you bond it out. Then you do the dredging. And we do I talked to Ryan McCready. He was the mayor, or not the mayor, he was the planner or the city manager at the time when they dredged the lake out of Decatur. It cost them $100 million, basically the cost of building a new water source. But what we would do is dredge along the shoreline and in the coves. And then you dredge deeper than your main body of water, because it becomes a filtration system for the silt and everything coming into the lake. So it's deeper, and then you create that valley, if you will, to make that work. But you do all that all at once. You bond that all at once, because the cost is immense. We've heard how expensive it is, and you have to spread it across the cost of the entire city. As Alderwoman Conley pointed out, this is our lake. It's everybody's lake. Everybody wants that water source. So those are how you move in that direction. But with regards to the water rate, we have to take care of these initial items and then assess where we're at. The good news is, at the beginning of the presentation, how low we're the lowest in the state. And so how do we move forward and do it responsibly, because that's how we should be operating, and what we have done and will continue to do. So I think those were all the clarifying items that I could provide. Oh, the beach house. That's, I've been to Decatur. That's nice. So we did put in our last RFP that we would make it accessible and build out the kitchen, help build out the kitchen, things of that nature, but we didn't get any response. But I think that's something we'll look at. But really, you have to look at the entire space with the zoo. The zoo's landlocked, and Decatur has a good zoo. That's what I've heard. I haven't been there. But we need to, kind of expand the boundaries. How's that all integrate with the beach house and the center park and all that, and tie it all together? So I'm sure that's going to be discussions in the months and hopefully not years ahead.
All right. Alderman Williams.
Oh, I'm half asleep. Wow. Okay, so Director Dow has some extra ARPA money. He got a grant, so he said he had extra ARPA money, wanted to buy some garbage cans. Just get that money from him and fix Donovan's problem. You know, that's much
That is
more
not
important than $2,000 garbage cans. So I really advise you to work with Donovan and Director Dow and get a hold of that money toward that, because that is important. I want to talk about the future, Director. I haven't heard a whole lot about the mandates or the timelines that the federal government and the state government is putting on municipal-owned utilities. I did hear you talk about 100, what was it, 100 megawatts field or something, a solar field. And did you say supplies was the reason?
Well, there's so if we go back, when we did an RFP for solar, well, not for just energy and capacity in general, and we worked through all that, and then we had some tough negotiations with some of the companies, and then one of the early factors was prevailing wage. They weren't paying prevailing wage, so obviously that's not going to work here in the city, and so they had to revise their price. So then that took time. Then finally getting to a place where we might move forward. I remember doing a presentation to the council saying, hey, this is kind of what we're looking at doing. This has been like 2 years ago or maybe or so. And then COVID happened. So that kind of put the brakes on things. And then the issues started happening, like with shipping costs. So they complained that the shipping costs went up like 300% and was impacting the price. The cost of steel going up. So what we found ourselves in was a continuous loop of going into they would increase their price. The lowest bidder would increase their price above the next bidder. We'd go to the next bidder saying, hey, does your price still hold? And then we would wait. They would come back and say, nope, our price increased. So we just kept the circle going for quite a while until then we finally hit the last one was the federal tariff issue. Basically, they had the tariff on solar panels coming from Chinese firms per se, and we kind of put the brakes on at that point. And the other thing too was impacting is the energy markets just climbing as well this year. So prices for solar ended up probably being around $55, $60 per megawatt hour, which is basically, almost double of what they were pre-COVID. What you don't want to lock in is a 20-year deal at elevated prices. We think prices are going to come down. I don't know if it's going to be in 6 months, maybe a year. I don't know, but we're going to continue to monitor it. The other thing that's changed too is these tax credits that have come out. From the federal government. So it's a possibility, instead of joining a private entity into a power purchase agreement, we can actually build them ourselves and maybe save money because our cost of capital is lower than theirs, plus getting the tax credits. So that's something that we would basically entertain doing an RFP this year to look at those options. So what that means would be is that, a developer might come in and say, and again, like a 100 megawatt solar farm is 750 acres of farmland. So it's not a small amount, it's significant. And there's developers that are getting land rights as we speak to every acre they can. So what that developer can do, maybe there's two things. One is to build a solar farm that they build and own and operate, and we just buy the power and energy with an agreement, or the developer then develops the project and turns it over to us to own and operate, but we get the tax credits that could be better overall in that regard. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's just helping me understand where we're at anyway, and why nothing hasn't really progressed. So I appreciate your answer. And you mentioned electric stations and things of that sort. But the thing that you ended with was researching grants and the name grants. Now this IRP that just expired, or is it expiring?
The integrated resource plan that we had done?
Yeah. Is that over with?
Yeah, it's pretty much over with. I mean, we've retired the plants. we've kind of indicated out of that analysis that basically about 100 megawatts of solar would be the best fit for what we have currently. And wind would not be helpful. It would actually, end up costing us money to operate or buy wind. It occurs at the wrong time.
So is there any plans to renew the plan or do another plan? Because isn't it true that grants come with having a plan? Like all these other opportunities for money will come with that plan?
No, not necessarily, no. What the grants come from would be is having, your RFP, request for proposals. So if we have a project ready to go, that's what we can apply for to get a grant. Having options available, not necessarily going to get you anything. You got to have something tangible, to apply for. So that's, and then, again, like an integrated resource plan, that's going to tell you a lot of different answers over the last 6 months with the way prices have fluctuated. And those IRPs are probably anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000.
Okay.
It would consume a lot of resources for us. Well, for part of it, yeah. In diverting all our internal resources essentially to do an IRP, we would not be looking at doing a solar or battery RFPs. The battery installation is a little bit unique in that we're trying to mobilize to try to get an RFP out sometime, I don't know exactly when for sure, but we want to try to take advantage of basically what we have for Unit 33. We have an interconnection agreement with MISO. We would like to take advantage of that if we can with the batteries.
So for the sake of time, I mean, we can talk. I'll talk with you, but for the sake of time, I just felt like I think this is a lot. And I really respect you guys for what you do and all you do. You guys are the experts. I'm not the experts, but I try to listen to my constituents. I try to be a good steward at making sure everybody understands everything. So I have a lot more questions that I'm not going to get into and ask. I'll just say that the overall presentation, I didn't hear a lot about the future, what a future CWLP looks like in as it pertains to where we're going as a world, not even just as a country, but as a world, as we're going and changing in everything that we do and how we live. We know we have a utility that's pretty much, if we don't reimagine and revision of how it operates and how we use it and start making plans for it, like we did when you did the 5-year plan and you closed down all the plants and everything, that's a plan. I didn't hear really a plan, but I did hear a few spots that I asked you about, and you gave me some answers, so I appreciate you. Thank you for allowing me to ask the questions.
Alderman Hanauer, then Red Path.
I'm gonna be real quick here. And I retired from the state of Illinois running computer networks statewide after 30 years. So I kind of know a little bit about the broadband stuff and and no offense, but I use Comcast cable, and I've got kids, videos, I got stuff going on. I don't even know what the kids are doing. They're, whatever they do. And I can guarantee you this, I've never had a blip, and I'm on Comcast. And it's all mathematics, but it's in a sense like running a huge pipe for water when you're only going to fill it up at maybe 1/10 of the space. And broadband's okay, when you're running to a big building, state building or one of the something like that. But to run it to an individual home is overkill. And I will just tell you, I don't know how many up here have internet through cable, but I guarantee you on the west side, there's a lot of people that have it. And I would say citywide, Comcast is where it'd be interesting to see what the market share is. And that's my only point. But don't come up and say, well, it's coax, it works. And and I'm telling you, we start getting I-3, Alderman McMiniman's seen it in his ward. I've seen it. Alderwoman Conley's seen it. I think you started to see it. It's not good. It's not good. And that, that's all I'm going to say about it. So, but I do know a little bit about computer networking. I did it in broadband, did it for a long time. I don't know what the current capacities are on your Wi-Fi, what you connect to. I forgot all that. But I can guarantee you, when you connect to your computer, you're not using 1,000 megabits or a gig that fiber produces, or the 10 gig or the 100 gig that it has now. You just don't use it. So it's time to get out of here.
Alderman Redpath.
I'm done.
All right, well, okay.
Mr. Chair,
I gotta say something.
I can't say I join with the gang up on I-3. I think the folks in our neighborhood are using it. The megabytes per second is vastly better. Multiple devices are available to be used simultaneously within a household. There's a rough period when they first put in the underground fiber, and there's some, but typically after they get it in and they restore the ground and such, people calm down. I agree. Fiber availability is important for all of our citizens. And why did I-3 start on the west side? Because, like the mayor said, they can make faster money. It's easier to put it in the newer neighborhoods. It's very difficult to put it in underground in the older neighborhoods. So I agree that it's important to try to encourage that. And then just the other point is, I thought the slides at pages on our sheets 10 and 12 were pretty good about long-term thinking. There's discussions in there about electric vehicle charging stations. That's thinking into the future. Smart LED lighting. There was talk about installing the AMI meters, which are smart meters, advanced meters. Talking about how the meters down the road will identify who uses what at what time and day, so that we can target incentives to get people to use electricity at low peak periods. And I think I agree there's not a lot we haven't locked into solar and of course not wind based on you talking about it, but I think they're thinking it through at least.
Alderman Redpath.
I was just cocking my gun. I'm ready to go.
All right, I'm ready to go too. I'll just say this. I'll just say this. Mr. Hanauer, Mr. Donlin, let's talk. Let's not cut the broadband, but I am with you. I support you in getting that fixed. And I can promise you, I understand all of you guys' issue when you have dirty water and bad houses, because that's amplified in my ward, double if not times triple. So let's take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Good night.
Mr. Chairman?
Nice graphics. Got dirty water. Stuff we've seen before, but.